Hello, welcome to Furious Driving, and today I'm at the wheel of an all-time great and another of my favourites. That's basically what I do this channel for, is to drive cars I just really like. Yeah, today I am at the wheel of another Rover. This time it's a P5B Coupe. Oh yes! Does it get better than this? The answer is probably not. If you would like to be at the wheel of this storming V8 classic, head over to the website of Sussex Classics, link in the description below, where this thing is currently for sale. Now on with the review!
Proud to be sponsored by Diamond Bright, the car care products that have been keeping the Furious fleet looking their best for a long time already. To find all you need to keep your car clean and protected, follow the link below to diamondbright.co.uk.
Hello, welcome to Furious Driving, and today we're looking at one of the most guaranteed, rock-solid, bona fide classics you're ever going to come across. A true slice of Britishana. Is that like Americana but British? I think it is. Back then it was known as the Rover 3000, the Rover 3.5, the Rover 3.5 litre. Today we just call it the P5, but in this case it's the P5B Coupe. Now this is quite an interesting and exciting car. Back at the time, the Rolls-Royce is what your bank manager would have driven. This is what the bank robber would have turned up in. It is a car with attitude and power, but was still incredibly respectable and part of the establishment in very much every sense of the word. But typical of Rover at the time, it wasn't just an ordinary boring car under the skin. Like most other manufacturers in the 1950s, Rover had been experimenting with the idea of monocoque shells because they knew they could make a stiffer, lighter, stronger car that took up less body space for the chassis and make a lower, sleeker car. So this is what they came up with in 1958. The P5, of course, the original saloon is a little bit taller. This one has that all-important word on the back, coupe. Now the front of the P5 was always an imposing beast. In standard 3-litre straight six form though, it only got the two top headlamps. When in 1967 they decided it would be a good idea to drop the Buick derived V8 3.5 litre in there, hence the P5B aspect of the name, it got these extra spotlights to add a bit more and presence to the car. Now it is an incredibly distinctive car, and it's a great looking, very well proportioned thing as well. And the man with the golden felt tips at Rover was David Bache, the guy who brought us the SD1, the P6, the original Range Rover. Pretty much everything he put his pen to came out more or less perfect, and this is no exception. Now every car designer does have their own, perhaps even unconscious design traits that mean you can spot their cars a mile off, and Bache's style was these very strong, pronounced shoulder lines that start at the front and go all the way to the end. You can always spot one of his cars just with this strong shoulder line. Now when the P5 first appeared in 1958, it came with Rover's straight six 3-litre, which is in no way a bad engine, and it was on a par with its rivals. However, it was not massively exciting compared to, well, this, which arrived in 1967, the Buick 3.5 litre V8 3528 cc's of thunder. With twin SU carburetors and in 10.5:1 compression ratio form, it made 184 bhp, which is rather a lot. I mean, back in the end of the 1960s, that was supercar trouncing territory. It really was an astonishing thing. Now, climbing aboard the car, the first thing you notice is just how heavy these doors are. They feel like they weigh an absolute ton, proper bank vault kind of stuff, but they smoothly glide on their hinges. Then you get a look at the door card itself. Big thing. This is actually vinyl rather than leather, as you might imagine it to be. It does have an adjustable height armrest on both sides. You've got these very cool modern looking door furniture here, and a big door pocket as well, which is quite a luxury item. But the thing which marks it out as a really luxury item car is this wood, the depth of the gloss on this timber, and inlaid stripe of aluminium as well. Just makes the thing look so classy. It is absolutely beautiful, and of course we do have locking quarter lights because we're posh. Now climbing aboard, we do have quite a big cutout because the screen wraps so far back around, very American influence still. Studebaker influence on the P4, yet more American influence on the P5. So mind your knees on there as you climb aboard. Before I sit on these seats, I will direct your attention towards them because they are a style of seat that Rover really kind of stuck with for many generations. You see something extremely similar in the P6, even into the 200s. At the very end, the bubble R3s and the 25s still had seats which are reminiscent of this style. They are extremely comfortable, and these have what were later known as the ET headrests. Obviously not until the Spielberg movie came out. They weren't called ETs back in the 60s, but the P6s have something very similar. I'm very desirable option. Now, starting with the instrument binnacle, another David Bach styling thing, which you'll find on the SD1 and the original Range Rover, is this floating instrument pod. So you've got a micro T-shelf here on top of the dials. So we've got our two main dials. It's speedometer going up to 120 and the rev counter redlining at 5250 and carrying on to an absolute detonation at 6,000 RPM. At the bottom of the speedo we've got our indicator lights, little green. Are these LEDs? They could be, they're very early if they are. Nice little twinkle sound. And either side of that we've got a bank of toggle switches. Wipers, whoops, didn't mean to turn them on. To quote Robert Palmer. A choice of fast and slow for the wipers, and panel lights on and off. Like a Saab night thing, but on a Rover many years previously. On the other side we've got switches for our lights, our heater on off. Curiously over here on the far right of the dashboard rather than over here with the rest of the heater controls. And finally, a blank, but nothing on this particular car. Underneath that we have got a bank of 4 instruments which look like they've been added aftermarket, but I believe are in fact as it came from the factory. So we've got our oil pressure, battery charge, water temperature and fuel gauge all slung underneath the main binnacle. Our final main control is down here. Our umbrella handbrake is on the right hand side, underneath a nice bit of timber, with a bright orange light to warn you that you've not taken that thing off. Moving back across the top of the dashboard, we have got a padded area because Rover were very interested in crash safety and occupant safety and that kind of thing, and so they were padding things quite a lot even at this point in the end of the 1950s into the 60s. Not much good as a tea shelf though. I have to say we will fail miserably placing a cup of tea up there. But that does house a pair of little tiny rotating air vent covers, very 1960s, very cool. In the centre we've got our place for the radio because posh cars came with radios in the 50s into the 70s, still an option on a lot of cars at that point. We have a speaker grill above that and controls for our heaters and demisters either side of the area, and then more of this rather lovely wood with aluminium trim all around it, and curious placement of the clock. You'll notice that it's right over there, far left in the corner, recessed into the timber in front of the passenger. How curious. Now below that we do have a useful storage tray, nicely padded on the front. Again, Rover were thinking about occupant safety, so this is all padded down here. And underneath this in the centre, it's a huge Borg Warner gearbox hidden underneath this, so it's a massive transmission tunnel, but it does give us lots of space for, well, padded leathery area for glasses, phones, bits and pieces, a few more bits and bobs, the 12-volt socket, and most importantly though, we've got our fold-out tray. And this isn't just any fold-out tray, because this opens up to reveal our hidden toolkit in the dashboard. How flash is that? Very, very nice to have all the components there still as well. Moving back from that tray and the little recessed oddment area, we've got the same ashtrays we'll find in the P6 a few years later, the same gear shift we'll find in the V8 automatic P6s a few years later, and a big, big space in the middle. Nothing going on here at all, apart from these big reclining things, so you can recline your seats with just one lift of your fingers and settle back into comfort. Same as they're used again in the P6, and lots of very fine quality carpet. Now underneath the instrument area you'll find a bit more storage area for the driver. Then we've got these bank of extra pulley out things, fuel reserve, cold start, or choke as we like to call it, bonnet pull and cold air pull to get a little bit more refreshing air on you if you want, blowing from underneath there. Final thing to mention is that the ignition keys on the left and the right hand side are your 2 stalks for indicators and whatnot. Final thing to mention is the steering wheel itself, which is a beautiful hard plastic thing, slim rimmed with this beautiful Rover emblem, the Viking in the centre with the horn ring. Give it a horn test. That's a very dignified parp. We like that immensely. Now there is one more thing to mention of the sound of the aircraft going above. This is the Coupe, so you do have to watch your head getting out. The roofline is surprisingly low. I shouldn't say surprising, it's a coupe, but it is very, very low indeed, and I have banged my head on it a couple of times. This is, of course, the price of style. Climbing in the back, it is really more of the same beautifully glossy 1960 style pale tan wood with the aluminium insert, the same 1960s cool, modern, futuristic door furniture. But looking forward, look how wide the back of this driver's seat is. It is absolutely huge. You feel like a child behind your parents' seats. It's absolutely vast. But they do have a fair few little toys to play with back here. First of all, down here we've got controls for a rear occupant heater and radio. This is excessive luxury here. This is a very, very posh and expensive car. Not only do we have an armrest here in the centre, we have got fold-out cup holders. This is about 40 years before cup holders were really a thing, on this kind of Formica tea tray, a large tea shelf area in the rear of the car. Big shiny ashtray area in the middle there as well. So yeah, and lots of comfort. There is an interior light over every single door, so no one is left in the dark. They've all got their own reading lights. There are coat hooks and grab handles everywhere. And just opulence, really, just a real feeling of quality and opulence. This car has had inertia reel seatbelts added in a matching colour, which is really nice. And you'll notice that extreme rake of the back window. You can really see it from back here, how hard it cuts in, like a hot rod, basically. It really is a very posh hot rod. It's a posh rod. Now, the final thing to mention here in the back are the more quarter lights on all four doors, which is why I think Harold Macmillan used to love these cars as Prime Minister, because he could smoke his pipe in the back of these things and tap the ash out the corner or something. Now, one notable thing to look at before I look in the boot is the construction of these doors. Same as on a P6, basically. You've got the big, strong door shell, then you've got this beautiful stainless steel architecture at the top, wrapping around the windows and shutting with this lovely tight, crisp line against the centre post. Boot is very, very capacious. It goes back a long way. As I say, this is the bank robber's choice, and you can get a fair few bags of gold in the back of here. Battery is concealed underneath this area here, and the spare wheel is slung underneath. It's quite a warm, stuffy day, but I've now opened the cold air vent down by my feet, and it's actually quite refreshing to do that. There's a little bit of a draft up your trouser leg. It's quite nice. Now, the addition of the V8 absolutely changed this car in every way imaginable. The power delivery is just so much more instant, and the noise the thing makes is just incredible. It does still retain that classic 1950s and 60s luxury car waftiness, and it will roll heavily into a corner. But with disc brakes all round, it will stop incredibly sharply. It was an incredibly expensive car, and so it came with not only the most amazing build quality imaginable. Restoring one of these cars is a painful experience, because the cost of every component and the time it takes to strip things down is just immense. The craftsmanship is like dismantling a cathedral. If you need to change the front or rear screen on one of these things, it's about 5 to 8 hours work if you know what you're doing to get the old glass out. The quality of all the materials is like second to none. They used to call it the poor man's Rolls Royce, but honestly, this is the car I would rather have.
The Coupe body was introduced in 1963 on the Mark II, and the trim and development mirrored the saloon cars.
Now, a lesson they learned from this car and put to better effect in the P6 was the switch layout. I read all these a few minutes ago, and now I have no idea which one is the lights. I think it's that one. No, it's the wipers. Okay, it's not that one. It's that one, maybe. That might be the lights. It's kind of hard to tell what you're turning on and off without stopping to read the labels. But once you've learned that, I'm sure it's not a problem.
With the lighter aluminium engine, it's actually less nose heavy than the 3 litre, but those tall tyre sidewalls have got a lot of flex in them. It uses semi-elliptic leaf springs at the rear, and front has torsion bar independent suspension for a traditional luxury car feel.
It does cling on quite impressively through the corners for a big, heavy beast.
Rover had been developing a 3-litre 100 horsepower V6 since before the Second World War, designed by Jack Swain, but it couldn't get it running well enough in the P4 development hacks, so focus moved to updating their 2.6 litre straight 6 from the old P4. It turned into an almost complete redesign though, with the cylinders moving in the block. But it never gave enough power and refinement for the ultimate goal they were looking for. In 1963, while trying to sell Rover engines for marine use, MD William Martin Hurst spotted the Buick V8s at Mercury Marine in Wisconsin, which were also being evaluated, and he was amazed to find out it had been taken out of production after just 3 years in use and would easily fit in the P5 and P6 engine bays.
It was brought over here, but then it wasn't just dropped straight into the first car. It was extensively reworked because the British driving style was very different to the American driving style. Engineers who were brought over from America didn't understand what they were needed for at first, until they were taken for a ride in a 2000 and came back white-knuckled and understanding how the rev range needed to change somewhat.
In the US, they've been die-casting the blocks with the cylinder liners held in place, and it hadn't given the best results. Rover realised sandcasting and press-fitting the liners would go much better. The engine was also extensively reworked, and peak power moved from 155 bhp at 4800 rpm with Rochester carbs to a freer revving 184 at 5200 with SUs.
Now I did find the light switch, and I love how you may better see the tip of the wing over there has got a glowing red indicator on top showing that I've got my side lights on now. A trick that was carried over to the P6, so you can find the corner markers really easily at any time. Very interesting driving a P4, then a P5, then a P6, and seeing how the car's progressed from one to the next. And each car is totally different, but has got a lot of styling cues and a lot of character that remains the same. It's only when you get to the SD1 that things start to feel very different indeed. Right, let's check what the turning circle is like on this thing, because I'm going to try and do a turn around this little island, which may or may not work out. Oh, and there's a ditch as well, just to make things more interesting. No problem. What an amazing turning circle this thing has. Now we are shuffling through the Borg-Warner 35, which is not the most technologically advanced gearbox of all time, it has to be said. There's a similar thing in my P6 V8, and I've never been a massive fan of it, but they are quite smooth, they're a bit slushy, and they do sap a bit of that power, but they do deliver the goods, and they're relatively tough for this power range.
A manual option was never offered with the 3.5, only on the 6-cylinder cars. In terms of performance, the V8 Coupe could hustle to 60 in 10.7 seconds and topped out at 110 mph, rapid for a luxury car of the time. If you go drag racing, the standing quarter should take 18.5 seconds. Not that we do that kind of thing to a car like this.
And it really is the smoothness of these things that made them absolute winners. People did adore these. The British government in particular loved them to the point that when production ended, they stockpiled the entire last batch, and they were still wheeling them out brand new with 0 miles. 10 years later, Margaret Thatcher on her first drive to Downing Street was in the back of one of these things. And it's just quite fitting that I'm driving this today, what with it being the Jubilee and everything. The Queen herself owns a P5B. It's a lovely maroon colour, same as her official state limousine. You can actually go and see it in Gaydon, the British Car Museum, because she is known to quite enjoy driving herself around the place. These days, well, most recently it's been Jags and Land Rovers, but back in the day she was quite a Rover fan as well. The funny thing is, this was a car that could absolutely handle back in the day. The P6 would outrun it, but back in the 60s, before the P6 came along, this thing, it could throw itself around a bit. Right now we're doing 40 miles an hour down a country lane, and it feels a bit like we're hoofing along. The Yaris in front looks like it's making zero effort whatsoever. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this ride out in this absolutely amazing P5B. It's a coupe, it's the perfect model in Admiralty Blue as well. It doesn't get better than this. If you've liked this, then please do, as always, hit like and subscribe, bell notification for future videos, and join me again next time driving something completely different.